Okay, so welcome to another Brightspace Lunch and Learn. My name's Lachlan Kalish, and I'm joined today by several other members from the Brightspace project team, including Beck McRae and Kelly Boone, and they'll be helping to respond to people's questions, comments, etc. in the chat as we go through. The Thursday and Tuesday sessions that we run in the Lunch and Learn are generally topic-based, so they're targeted. And today's session, we are going to be looking at the new moderation tool that is being turned on in Brightspace today. So you will be able to see this tool in your own subject sites probably this afternoon, I would expect. I'm going to give you, I guess, a sneak preview of what it looks like and how it works. We are recording the session, and you'll have access to that yourself afterwards. We're happy to keep sharing things like the links to the knowledge articles and what have you as we go throughout the session. So if you haven't got it already, I'll pop it in once now and then again later on if you need it. Effectively, I would be referring you to the help site knowledge article as your default first go-to, and for other people that you're forwarding this on to, because it is quite a comprehensive breakdown of the functionality that's available with this tool. So I'm going to give you a walkthrough, show you how it works, talk a little bit about the implications of using it, not using it, etc. But the knowledge article is a more comprehensive resource around the use of this tool. So with that in mind, let's begin. So what I'd like to do first here is talk a little bit about what we know currently about moderation with what we've been given so far in Brightspace. And that is when we have our markers, mark an assessment, as we have a sample here that has been marked. There's only 5 students here, but you can imagine if it was at scale. And we have a number of papers that have been marked. So we have draft marks being done by evaluators who've gone in and clicked Save Draft. At that point in time, the only way that the convener or others would have to be able to access what's happening inside here or see scores is to go into the individual papers, look at the evaluation, have a look at the annotations if there are any in there, potentially open a rubric, for example, to have a look at what the rubric scores were, see the overall grade, overall feedback. You get the idea. You've got to go through them one by one to be able to see them prior to the students seeing them when you hit the publish button. Because the moment that either publish or publish all is selected, 2 things happen. One of them is that the student receives an email notification that the marking's been done and that they can access their grade. There's a link to it, and then it's available in My Grades. So this is about visibility in the first instance when we hit publish. If we go back to our submission list, I'm going to talk a little bit about that visibility. One of them is that because the assignment submission portal, so if I go back to my list here, because this portal here is visible, when we hit publish, students will get the notification. That's why they get the notification, because the assignment portal is visible. And because the column in My Grades is also visible, the students will be able to see it in My Grades. And in case you don't believe me, I have a student right here who can currently see in My Grades that they don't have a result for this item, but they can still see it because the column is not hidden. And if they go into their assessment area, they can see the portal where they have made a submission previously. So that is what I mean by visibility. The submission portal is visible, so the student can see it here. They've made a submission. They can make resubmissions as long as it's visible. And because the gradebook column's also visible, they can see it even without a grade in My Grades. So that's important to know when we're thinking about the risk of hitting that publish button. So previously we'd been saying to people, go into the portal, go through each of those individual student entries, evaluations, deciding whether you think they're right or they need work, etc., and then ultimately hitting the publish button. When you're happy with all of them, either publish or publish all, and it will go through and the students get it. That's that's where we were up to in terms of moderation as such. Not all that user-friendly, having to go through each individual paper one by one by one. I've only got 5 here and I'm already not happy with it. So I can only imagine what that's like when you're dealing with hundreds of students. Now we talk about what the moderation tool does. The premise with this tool is that because I don't want the students to be notified until I'm ready, I'm going to hide those 2 areas, the submission portal and the gradebook column. So the way I'm going to hide the submission portal for the students is I'm going to edit the assignment. And if we wind back the clock a little bit, you might apply this to thinking when you first set up an assessment in future. And I'm going to establish an end date for this assignment. So for today, I'm going to set it to this morning so that we can see how this works. But I would suggest you think about this in terms of maybe 10 days after your due date for a task. And that will give your late submitting students a window to be able to still see the portal and submit. If students have extensions and things, your end date won't matter. They'll still be able to submit up until their extension date. But for today, I'm going to set an end date of this morning. Let's call this 9 a.m. And once it is hitting that end date, I'm going to change it so that I have the portal hidden. With this setting in place, once I hit this point, they'll no longer be able to see it. So if I hit save and close, bring back our student view, student goes into their assignment area and nothing there. So they cannot see the portal, and that's important because it means they're not going to get the email notification when I hit publish. That's the first part of the equation. Next part, as I mentioned before, is the gradebook column. If your gradebook column is hidden, they're not going to see it in my grades when I hit publish. So I'm going to go into the gradebook. There's my column here. If we switch into manage grades, I'm going to hide this column. It's currently visible as the student saw. I'm going to now hide it. That's been done. And again, student view, when the student goes into my grades, there's now nothing there. So there is no danger of me hitting publish. No email notification, nothing in my grades. We can talk more about strategies for how to do these things at the beginning when we set up, or whether columns are hidden by default and all that kind of stuff. But effectively, those are the 2 things that must be in place. Gradebook column hidden, student submission portal hidden. We can now publish without fear of students getting things before we're ready for them to. Okay, so my portal is hidden. I'm going to go in here. Whoops, not going to edit it. Hang on. Let's get out of the gradebook, Lachlan, into my assignment dashboard, open up my assignment, and I'm ready now to publish all of these draft marked papers. So I'm going to select all and hit publish, or I could just hit publish all, either or. I get a warning about it saying how many are affected. Okay, great. Hit publish. It's now going to publish. Sometimes if you just hit F5, it'll wake the computer up a little bit, but it is happening in the background. And now they're all published, but the student has got nothing. So they don't know that it's been published. So because it's been published, we are now ready to launch the moderation tool itself. And we find that in our assessment menu, underneath quizzes and assignments, we now have grades moderation. This is visible to conveners and to coordinators. They'll be able to launch and use this tool. Other roles will not. So I'm launching this as the subject convener. It will give me a list of all of the assessments in the subject site. This is the one that I want to work on, the moderation test. And you'll see, if I zoom in a little, gives me a number of different tools. The first one I'll start with, clicking on the title of the assessment, it will now give me a full view top down of all of the grades for the task. It will also show me any students that have extensions, for example, in place. Conveners and coordinators will be able to, Helen. List of students. extensions or not, I can jump straight to the student papers here through the submission link, and I can see the spread of their grades and make adjustments to them from here as well. You'll notice that above we've got some filter options if I wanted to look at particular sections, if it's all cohorts in there. If I have groups in place like marking groups, I can use the same filtering tools that we have available to us when we mark. I can also filter by results. So if I wanted to look at students that had got less than 50%, for example, I could change my filter and say those that are less than or equal to 50 and apply. I don't have any that fit that qualification here, so let's switch that around. But you can use that filter to narrow the view. And again, as I said, we can open up those individual submissions and it will open the evaluation interface for us. And I can start having a look through the annotations made by the marker, for example. I can look at the rubric and the overall grade, feedback, attachments, etc. You'll notice down the bottom here that because it's been published, the options that I can see are either to update or retract. There's no longer save draft because it's been published. So at this point, if I needed to make changes, I would be making them at the student individual submission level. If you change this grade here on the right-hand side where we get this top-down view of all of the grades, however, that will flow back into the student's result, but it won't talk to anything else in the student's submission. And what I mean by that is things like a rubric. If I've modified this score, it doesn't talk to the rubric and adjust any of the rubric values if you've used a quantitative rubric. You would need to change the rubric yourself. So yes, your overall score might be changed and that will still flow through to the student's view in my grades, etc. But there might be some discrepancy between the rubric calculating the score and what their actual overall grade is. You just need to be aware that it doesn't talk backwards to a rubric that's tallying that score. So if I go back to our first screen, looking at our moderation view of the assessment details, it gives us that top-down view of the whole cohort of the results. We can open up submissions. We can look at things like assessment dates, etc. That's our first screen. And I also want to point out to you that down the bottom here, you'll notice there's a big blue button that says release. So this release button is very important in the moderation tool because what it means is that selecting this will unhide the column in the gradebook. The student will get the notification that the task has been marked. So it undoes all of that hiding. So it's important that you understand at the end of this process, you do need to hit release to finish the process of moderation. And you find it by going into the task and looking down the bottom. This is an optional tool, absolutely. And I might stop before I move on to some of those other functions within the tool. Check in with Beck and Kelly. Have we got any questions, comments that we want to engage with at this point?
Thanks, Lachlan. Yeah, there's a question from Helen that I haven't got to in the chat that is around visibility if the students haven't yet submitted. Are you able to walk us through that just one more time, please?
Sure. So once we start modifying due dates, end dates, etc., and in this case, the reason I was putting an end date on this portal was so that it would automatically hide once we get to this point. Now, at that point, no student will be able to submit past this date. They won't even be able to see the portal unless they've been given an extension. So if they've been added to special access, been given an extension that goes past this date, they'll still be able to see the portal. They'll still be able to submit. That bypasses these settings. Otherwise, the portal will be hidden and they're not going to be able to see it, to select it, to be able to submit. So that was why I was suggesting potentially as a workflow for this moving forward, that you still leave yourself a window of time after the due date for your late submitting students to be able to see the portal. Yep. So that's why I was suggesting 10 days. So if we had our 15-day turnaround or 21 days, etc., you would still have your window of time for moderation at the end, but it would still allow some time afterwards for students who had not been given extensions to still be able to see the portal. Once you input an end date like this, yeah, that date is going to play a big part in whether or not the students can see the portal or not. Any others, Beck?
Sorry,
That's okay.
there is a couple of others. It's moving fairly quickly, so I just wanted to make sure I haven't skipped any. Okay, Simone has just made a comment. Is there any chance of an additional editable column where we could make notes, for example, to indicate which papers have been moderated and increased/decreased?
Okay, that's a good question. I think if I move on to the next kind of feature that might answer some of that question. The first part, I suppose, is that you can always add other columns in the gradebook that you want to make notations against, but that's not within that first screen that we were looking at in the moderation tool. But I will, when I proceed, that will answer some of that question.
And then just before we go on, one from Nicole, can I do this and then not release, i.e. if I want to check 1 week out before the release date? And Nicole, I'm sorry, you may have to possibly elaborate because I didn't catch exactly what Lachlan was talking about at that point.
Yeah, that's all right. Sorry, Lachlan, it's just me again. So
Okay.
if I want to do this 1 week before it's due to be published and released to the students,
Yep.
can I sticky beak in here, not hit release, cancel? Will that then take me back to it not being hidden? Like, can I just sort of go in multiple times before its published date?
Okay, so it's
For a
a really
peek.
good question. So to get into this tool, to use this to begin with, we have to have published the papers. Now, so we've hidden the portals and the column, we've published the papers. If you hit save, for example, and look at any changes, they're still published and the submission portal's still hidden, the gradebook's still hidden. You
Yeah.
can leave it like that until you are ready to come and hit release.
Release. Okay, right.
That part is fine. It's the notion of, can we go back to making it visible again and having students still kind of going in? That would involve unpublishing, and you would have to go in individually to the student papers and reverting them, like retract their published status. So it starts to get a little bit more manual if you want to actually reset things back to students
Yeah,
seeing
okay.
everything.
No.
But you might not have been talking about going to that extreme. If you just mean,
Yeah.
I'm not ready for them all to get it yet, but I just
Yeah.
want to have access to this over time until the date you're ready to release. Absolutely. You go in here and you can either hit save or close, launch it as many times as you like.
And those students that have extensions, right? So if I do this in the last week of before I release the on-time students, right? So 7 days out before it's due to be published, the students that have extensions for GPs or for 7-day automatic, they can still submit. It doesn't impact on them. And I can just leave everyone sort of. And what about markers? So if I've still got marking happening in the background and I've published what's done so far, I have it all hidden for that last week, can markers still do their job?
Absolutely. So the markers will still be able to see these items, even if you've got an end date or it's hidden, for example. They can still come in here and look at the drafts, etc., and mark them. Now, whether you're publishing them or you're getting them to publish, those late submissions, etc., that you're dealing with afterwards are not going to be visible to you in the moderation tool until they're published. So yes, the markers can still get in and do what they need to do. You're still going to need to publish. And I think I can see a comment from Beck in there in the chat about you potentially can then publish individually those late papers, or you can just hit publish all again, either or, as you're moving along. Yep. Any others, Beck, or am I good to keep going? I may have lost her. All right, I'll keep going. I'll come back to some of the questions and things in a bit. Where do we get up to? Right, we were looking at that first screen in the moderation tool that allows us to see extension dates if they've been put in, open the individual submissions and look at the spread of grades and potentially make changes. Okay, that's good. I'm going to hit close at this point. I'm not ready to release yet, and I want to show you some of the other features that are in here. We've got two other areas that I want to show you. You'll also notice there's a special access column on the right-hand side, which will tell me if there have been any extensions granted for this one. So there are some in place at this point. The next one we have is an action area called Go to Gradebook. And if I open that up, it gives me a special view of the gradebook that only shows this assessment task, including all of the grades. So this time around, instead of showing me the special access dates, the extension dates, it's giving me a look at the feedback that has been done against these assignments. So I can see that. So there is a column here that you can put text comments in, but this is actually visible to students. So I think Simone was asking before about an area that we can add notes into. For that to happen, you would need another text column in your gradebook rather than as part of the moderation tool. I will double check that. And if there's anyone else in the meeting from the project team that is aware, but my understanding is that this feedback area will also go to the student as well. Anyone wants to tell me that I'm wrong there, I'm happy to hear it. What kind of notes would you put in there? So this is actually a feedback that'll end up going to the student on top of the feedback they get within their individual assessment task. So it's a good question. I'm not sure. Ali.
Yeah, I was just going to ask for clarification if that is the text box from the assignment itself.
At the moment.
Or is it separate?
I think it's separate. I think it's separate because this is definitely not part of the feedback that I did for all of the assignments. Let me just check that. Let's have a look in here. If we have a look at some of these submissions, we'll go into the second one, for example. Maybe it is. Maybe I did the same placeholder text for all of them. Let's have a look at the next one. Oh, it's looking like it.
Because that actually would be really good as far as moderation goes, allowing the coordinator to go through and see the comments as a snapshot.
Yeah, so I'm noticing on this fifth one, for example, that's in there, it's slightly different. Oh yeah, it is. So this is a shortcut directly to the feedback from the marker that you can see here in this column, and you can make modifications to it. It'll open it in a new screen. Ooh, anyone who can grade this activity can see these comments. Thank you, Ali, for making me open this.
And that could be where you put comments about what's been moderated.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, right, we have a separate column area here that's only visible to the markers and not to the student. Perfect. Right, so you can open that comment area here and put that in without the student seeing it. And this is the feedback that they get in the task. So you can adjust that at this top level as well. I think that's pretty handy by the looks of things. Kirsten.
Thanks, Lachlan. So can I just check with that? Just so you wrote in there, moderated up or moderated down. Then is there a way you can see in a class list? I'm just thinking of doing quasar reports and you want to say what was moderated up and down. Is there any way in the class list, like the grade book, that you can access that information? Or is it individual?
I'm going to need to ask the question and find out where it's captured the private comments. If it's exportable, for example, if it's in a list, what other areas outside opening this individual box we can get it from.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll have to ask that question. It's an excellent one. I don't know is the answer. So I'll have to ask. But yeah, I can see in that first screen that we've got here, I'm not seeing it as part of the dashboard, even once it's been put in. So short of me reopening it. Was it number 5 that I opened or number 1? I can't remember. Oh yeah, number 1. Yeah, we'll find out. We'll get a response back. Okay, so yeah, that's our second screen that we get, which gives us a single column view of the gradebook results. Again, we can modify these, and I'll remind you again that if you make changes to the grade here, it's not going to talk to other parts of your assessment feedback. For example, if you've used a rubric to quantify the grades. So there you'll get a discrepancy between what's showing in the rubric and what the adjusted grade is. We just have to keep reminding people of that as well. Okay, and we can open the actual submissions from here as well if we need to, which is good. It'll launch the evaluation. And again, we could make changes to things from here if we needed to. So that's our second screen. You'll also notice that you've got the ability to do things at scale. So if I wanted to add the same set of feedback to a group of students for whatever reason, you would be able to click on add feedback at this point, and it'll do it for all of those students. So there is a bulk feedback option that may be of value to you for a variety of scenarios, I'm thinking. Kirsten, have you got another question for me?
No, I forgot to put my hand down. I'll do that now.
No worries. Okay, so I quite like that bulk feedback option potentially. I'm not quite sure exactly what scenarios I'd use it for, but I'm sure there might be some where I need to give the same feedback to some of the students in the class. All right, let's have a look at the other column that we were looking at before, which gives us some statistics to have a look at. We go back to my moderation tool. Sometimes it jumps between the full gradebook view and the actual moderation tool. So I'm going to go back into the moderation tool. This time I'm going to look at grade distribution. Okay, so at this point, it's looking at the number of submissions. It's giving us the minimum score, the maximum score, class average, mode median, standard deviation, etc. Then it gives us an infographic of that information. User stats. Okay, then we get, I guess, the spread of the students in a graph view. Not sure if that's going to be of much value to me, but maybe it is for you. Filter the views, again, cohort group users.
It could be useful, Lachlan, if you've got different, to quickly see the markers.
Yeah, so if you've
If
organized
you've
them
got
in
your markers in groups, you might be able to
groups,
see,
absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think when you have, if you've used another way of allocating markers rather than the groups tool, it's going to be a bit harder to get them from here, but certainly you can use your view filters in here if you've used your groups for it. Okay, so that is, I guess, our lightning tour of the moderation tool. What I'm actually going to do now is hit that release button that I showed you earlier on so we can see what that final stage does. At the moment, let's launch it again. Grade moderation. The first one is still hidden. The grade status is still hidden. It's not released to students, but I finished my moderation, made my changes. I'm happy with it all. At this point, I'm going to hit the release button. Selecting release, I get the option at that point to decide. By default, it's going to send them that notification email saying that it's done. You can now get your grades in My Grades, for example, but you can also choose to release them without them getting the notification. I'm not sure if that's something that you would necessarily do, but by default, they're going to get the notification. Hit release. And now what we're going to find, if we go back to the assessment area, what I might do is show you the student view. That's a better way because it's been released. CSU student 5 is now able to see in My Grades their score. Publish mark. You'll notice in this case, we've got whatever grading scheme is in place. Feedback, they can open up the rubric, etc. I only had a small amount of commentary there available to them. They can also print that. If we go back to where the assessment portal was originally found, the student can see it, but they're not going to be able to submit. And at this stage, they've not read their feedback on the actual paper itself. So I'll stop there. I'm sure if people have got questions in and around the use of this, but effectively the reason I wanted to start with unpacking that hidden aspect of both the submission portal and the gradebook column is that because you cannot launch this moderation tool without those two things being in place. So it undoes that hiding when you release, when you're ready for it, but you don't get to see all of those things together until they're hidden and we stop students getting the notifications and being able to see them. All right. Kel, I can see you in the room. Have we got questions, comments, etc. that I've missed or need to deal with?
There was a question from Elise. Is the notification a no reply, or can students reply to the email?
It is no reply when they come from the system. So system notifications, yeah, they can't reply to those. So it's not the same as if it came from an individual academic. It's a good question. What it does, Simone, so I can just see your question in there, it changes the status of the assessment. Let me get back to the academic view. If we edit this assignment, what it actually is now, you'll see that the visibility says that they can see it, but they can't submit. So essentially, unless they've been given special access, that's how it works. So it's changed it from being hidden, no one can see it, to yes, the student can see that assessment portal. This is the student view. They can see it, but they cannot submit. If I try and submit at this point, it's been marked. Go down, go down, go down. There is nowhere for me to be able to submit this assignment now. It's been marked. So yeah, it restricts submission. Any others, Kel?
I think Beck may have grabbed everything unless I've missed something. Please just jump in if we have.
My other question was, should it be in our Brightspace right now? Because I can't see it.
It's not there yet. It'll be after lunch that they turn it on.
Great, thank you.
No worries.
I do want to flag a question from Kirsten, who has asked if we can look at how this works in a really large cohort. Now, I don't think that you probably have something that you can demonstrate right now, LK, but we can take this back to the project team. There's been a few comments about, you know, scaling this up to large cohorts and what are some of the implications of that. So we'll definitely take it back to the team.
Yeah,
Can I
absolutely.
ask another question as well?
Sure.
If that's okay. So, and I don't know if this is the case for other subjects, but in the really big subjects, putting students in groups is really challenging because you can't see when they're in a group. Like it's really, you know, there's a risk of having people in more than one group, marking group, for example, or not allocating people because you can't see if they're in a group or not. Is there any option coming in that will let us be able to see in the background, things like that?
So you mean apart from looking in kind of the groups tool, Shani, or
well, when we go into the groups tool, if we put somebody in a group, you can see that they're in the group when you're in that list, but they don't appear in a group in any other context. So if I went into, say, if I put students in Elisa's group and then I went into Kirsten's group, they don't appear allocated. They just appear empty until I allocate them into the group. So it makes the risk of doubling up or missing groups really problematic in our big subjects.
I think just off the top of my head, the first thing that I would be saying is that if you look within the groups tool itself and select all of your groups, I don't know if that's the right type of group for me to look at in this particular subject, cheese making workshops, really. Anyway, I've probably got a better site that I could show it to you here. Depends how many students you've got in there. What I want to say is when you actually select all of the groups and go to enroll your users, it will show you all of the groups together next to each other with all of the students, and it'll show you who's in a group or not in a group, and that's where you can allocate them and jump them between one and the other. That's the best way to get that
is
top-down
fantastic.
visibility. Yeah.
Just on that, Lachlan, one thing that I found a little frustrating is when you're allocating people to groups, when you reallocate someone, it should really automatically take it off the other person, but it doesn't. You've got to manually, put one on, get one off. Could that be fed back to developers? Because that's if you allocate someone to a group, that's saying, right, the latest version is what I want, and so it really should remove it from the other person.
Absolutely. I agree. I think, but the doing it this way, when you've actually selected all of the groups at once and then enrolling your users, will actually give you that breakdown. I was working with someone last night on this. So that was, I want to say maybe nursing 277. Let's have a look. Inside groups. She created a bunch of groups for marking. So in this case, let's look at, right. So they had a bunch of students in all of these different groups. If we select all of them and then go to enroll, what that ends up giving us is this visibility of whether or not students are in a group. So yes, I can take it off this particular marker, for example, and add them to another one, but at least I get that visibility to make sure they're allocated. I know it's not as good as I select this one, it removes them from others, but at least you get that kind of visibility all in the one spot. I found that's the best way to be sure, is to open all the groups up together. Sorry, slightly off topic for the rest of you, but yeah, it's all related. Sue.
Hi there, Lachlan. Just want to bring up something about like in your grade centre or your your final grade thing. I just had something earlier this week when we were hiding things like assessments were hidden, grade book columns were hidden. I had a student that was able to see a final grade fail at this part of the session and got really worried. So we had a couple of those in one of our subjects, and found out that it was probably due to because I had students in categories. So there was like, say, 6 cohorts, and the assessment tasks and everything were under the heading like of Wagga distance, Wagga internal, etc. And the category wasn't hidden, I was told. So that's why I had to hide the categories on top of everything else, so that the student didn't see a fail grade, final grade.
For a task or for the whole subject?
For the whole subject.
Right. So the whole subject's grade essentially feeds into the final calculated grade column by default, and it is hidden by default in
and
every subject side.
Yeah, and it was hidden when I looked there.
Right. But they still got a notification around the final grade.
Yes.
Right. We might need to take that offline and have a look at the example a bit more, but by default, they shouldn't be seeing any of that in the grade book at all. They're meant to get that information from Banner, like from our other systems, for example.
So,
we don't provide final grades for subjects inside the LMS. It is meant to happen outside Brightspace. This is for our view only.
Yeah, well, that's what happened. Yeah. So just, I suppose, beware if anybody's got cohorts under category headings or something like that, if that's how you've got your assessment tasks set up.
Yeah, it'd be worth having a look at. Maybe we can go over some of the details afterwards.
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks, Sue. Okay, we're a little bit over time, folks. Thank you for those that have continued to stick around. I'm happy to hang around for another 5 or 10 if people have got other questions. But at this point, I'm going to actually stop the recording and say a big thank you